Don't make that face, Claire. My father said it into the microphone. My mother stood beside him and smiled. Megan had just taken her diploma in Boston. The room was full of families, cameras, faculty, noise. Then my father said, "At least one daughter turned out useful." People laughed. Enough people. I felt heads turn toward me. My mother took the microphone and said, "Claire still has time to figure herself out." More laughter. I looked at Megan. She laughed too. Afterward, I found my mother and asked why she had done it. She said, "Don't be selfish. Today is your sister's day." My father heard me and added, "Learn to take a joke." That was when I understood the joke was never the point. The point was that my pain would always come second to their image. If you have ever heard, "It was only a joke," stay with me. I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, in a house that looked perfect from the street. Inside, it was cold enough to train you. Everything was clean. Everything matched. Everything was placed to be seen. People admired my mother's taste and my father's standards. They said Megan and I were lucky. I used to hear that and think they had never opened our front door. Megan was the pride of the family. That was not implied. It was said. My parents said she was polished, focused, exceptional. They said she represented the Bennett family well. I was never described that way. I was the daughter with potential, the daughter who needed to try harder, the daughter who should learn from her sister. The comparisons were constant. If Megan got praise, I got advice. If she did something well, I got a lesson. If she spoke carefully, I was told to think before speaking. If she impressed someone, I was asked why I could not do the same. No one needed to call me a disappointment every day. The structure did that work by itself. Even the practical things were uneven. Megan had the better room, bigger windows, new furniture, privacy. I had the smaller room at the back, a desk that shook, shelves that leaned. Her tuition was called an investment. Mine was discussed like a strain. Her gifts were celebrations. Mine were reminders. A planner, a coat, something useful, something that said improvement was expected. I still worked. I still studied. I still learned how to stretch money and keep quiet. That matters. I was not careless. I was not drifting. I took jobs where I could. I paid for what I could. I learned to say thank you for less than what Megan got. I learned to say, "It's fine," before anyone asked. That house rewarded silence. It punished visible hurt. My parents had favorite lines. "For your own good. For your future. You'll thank us later." Those sentences covered everything. If they controlled me, it was concern. If they mocked me, it was motivation. If they favored Megan, it was because she knew how to use what she was given. I was told to be more like her, more grateful, more disciplined, more worthy of pride. There were years when I asked myself whether I was too sensitive. Maybe I was. Maybe Megan really was easier. Maybe my parents believed pressure built character. Maybe they were strict in the way some parents are strict. Maybe I was the one making things heavier than they were. That question sat beside me for years. It kept me in place longer than love ever did. But some facts do not need interpretation. Megan was chosen. I was managed. She was introduced with detail. I was introduced with a shrug. "This is Claire," my father would say. "She's finding her path." I was still a teenager the first time I understood that a sentence could shrink a person in front of others without sounding openly cruel. That house was full of sentences like that. By the time Megan graduated college, the pattern was old. The ceremony was in Boston. My parents planned every detail: flowers, dinner, photos, hotel rooms, guest lists. My mother bought 2 dresses. My father practiced an informal speech at the kitchen counter. No one asked whether I wanted to go. Of course I was going. A perfect family needs every member in the frame. I told myself I would sit still, clap, congratulate Megan, and leave. That was my usual method. Endure first, feel later. Then my parents found the microphone. People have asked why I did not walk out. I froze. Humiliation is not always loud. Sometimes it is neat, public, clean enough that your body goes still before your mind catches up. I heard the laugh move across the room. I heard my own name turned into part of someone else's celebration. At dinner, my father repeated the joke. Quieter, closer. He tapped his glass and told Megan she had carried the Bennett name well. Then he looked at me and said, "There's still hope for the other one." A few people smiled without meeting my eyes. My mother told him to behave, but she was smiling too. Megan looked at her plate. No one corrected him. No one said my name after that. I do not remember dessert. I remember the check. I remember my mother discussing photos. I remember my father talking about Megan's future as if he had built it himself. And I remember understanding something cold. In my family, image came first. Pain came second. Truth came last. That night, a decision started forming. Quietly. No speech. No scene. Just a crack I could feel under everything. I had spent years trying to earn softer treatment by being quieter, better, easier. Boston showed me the terms would never change. Only my distance could. I was done asking them to see me. If you have ever gone silent before you left, you know that feeling. If you have ever been the child a family could afford to lose, stay with me. I went back to Newton with them because I had nowhere else to go that night. The drive home was full of praise for Megan. My father talked about her posture on stage. My mother talked about the flowers and the dean. Megan answered when spoken to. No one mentioned the microphone. No one mentioned my face. That silence was familiar. In our house, if my parents ignored the damage, then the damage became bad manners. When we got home, the front hall lamp was on. The framed family portrait still sat by the stairs. Megan in the center. I was in it too, technically. That word fits much of my childhood. Present, technically. I went to my room and shut the door. A few minutes later, my mother knocked once and came in before I answered. She said, "Don't ruin this weekend." I said, "You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people." She crossed her arms and said, "We were celebrating your sister." I asked, "By calling me useless?" She gave me the look she used when she wanted me to feel childish. "You always do this." Meaning I made the ugly thing visible. Meaning she wanted the surface back. My father appeared in the doorway. He did not come in. He said, "If you spent half as much time improving yourself as you spend feeling offended, maybe that joke wouldn't sting." He said it calmly. That made it worse. He said it like advice. My mother nodded once. That was the whole family response. I barely slept. By morning, I had two thoughts fighting each other. Leave. Maybe I am overreacting. That is what families like mine do well. They injure you, then make you grade your own pain before anyone else has to. You start defending them inside your own head. At breakfast, my mother was rearranging flowers from the graduation dinner into clean vases. My father was reading the paper. Megan came in wearing a new college sweatshirt. It looked like a normal, proud morning. Then my father folded the paper and said, "You owe your mother an apology." I asked, "For what?" "For your attitude." There it was. No apology was coming. Not later. Not privately. There was nothing to revisit because, to them, nothing serious had happened. Megan finally spoke. She said, "Can we not do this?" I asked, "Do what?" She said, "Make everything heavy. Heavy. Not cruel. Not unfair. Heavy." My humiliation had already been translated into inconvenience, and she let it happen. Maybe she was protecting herself. Maybe she had learned the same rules I had. Maybe she liked being safe at the top. I did not know. I only knew she had laughed. I went upstairs and packed. Not dramatically, just in order. Jeans, work clothes, books I had bought, my old laptop, what money I had, what I could carry. I was still in college then. I had part-time work, not much else, but almost nothing was starting to feel cleaner than that house. Halfway through packing, I sat on the floor and asked myself the question I had asked for years. Was this control or concern? Were my parents truly cruel, or simply people from a generation that dressed criticism up as love? Was I leaving over one ugly joke and a lifetime of smaller cuts? That is how these families survive scrutiny. Every wound sounds manageable when taken one at a time. Every pattern can be renamed discipline. Every child can be told she is too sensitive. If you have ever doubted your own hurt because the room still looked respectable, I know that feeling. Then I remembered my mother smiling into the microphone. I remembered asking for help and being told not to be selfish. The question answered itself. My mother came upstairs and saw the suitcase. She did not ask if I was all right. She said, "Don't be ridiculous." I told her I was leaving. She asked, "To teach us a lesson?" I said, "To protect myself." She laughed once. From her, that sound meant contempt. "Protect yourself from what? Your family?" I said nothing. She stepped closer and said, "You have always wanted to believe you were less loved. That is not our fault." Even my pain was now evidence against me. My father came up when he heard our voices. He saw the suitcase and said, "If you walk out over this, don't expect us to fund your dramatics." I said, "You already don't." He went still. He did not like facts, said plainly. My parents preferred soft versions of hard things. I carried the suitcase downstairs. Megan was standing near the kitchen. She did not stop me. She did not help me either. She said, "Claire, just let this cool off." I asked, "Did you think it was funny?" She hesitated too long. Then she said, "You know how they are." I answered, "Yes. That's why I'm leaving." Outside, my father stood on the front steps and said, "You'll come back when you're done punishing everyone." My mother stood behind him. Neither of them looked afraid to lose me. That told me more than anything else. I left Newton that afternoon. I found a room I could afford. I worked more hours. I paid my own tuition from then on. Not gracefully, not comfortably. There were weeks I stretched groceries and slept badly and told no one. But every bill I paid myself loosened something inside me. No one got to call me ungrateful for what I earned alone. The first year after I left, my parents sent practical messages, forms, tax questions, holiday notices, nothing that looked like remorse. My mother told relatives I was going through a phase. My father said independence had made me arrogant. Megan sent very little. A birthday text once. A short message at Christmas. Never the one sentence that mattered. "I am sorry," I laughed. So I cut contact completely. No visits, no calls, no updates. I finished school. I built a career in medical research. I found therapy and learned how many injuries never bruise. 7 years passed. Then one night my mother called. Not to apologize. Not to ask how I had lived. She said, "Claire, we need your help with Megan. If you have ever been remembered only when you became useful, stay with me. And if you have ever wondered whether distance was cruel, what came next answered that for me." I knew from my mother's tone that this was not a reunion. Something had broken on their side. I asked what had happened. She said Megan had been in an accident. After that, pain medication. After that, more medication. Then missed work. Then no work. Then days in bed and nights none of them could control. She spoke in fragments, as if clear language itself might stain the family. I asked where my father was. She said, "Here." I could hear him in the background, listening, not speaking. My mother said, "She won't listen to us anymore." That sentence caught in my ear. Not "she is suffering." Not "she needs help." Won't listen. Even in crisis, control was still the grammar. Then she said, "We need you to come home and help us save her." Home. Help us. Save her. I had been gone almost 7 years. My pain had earned no apology. But now I was needed. Now I was family again. I asked, "Why me?" She said, "Because you are steady. Steady. Not loved. Not missed. Steady." My father took the phone. He said, "This is your sister," as if blood settled everything. I asked, "Did either of you ever think about what you did to me?" He paused, then said, "This is bigger than old grievances. Old grievances. That is what public humiliation becomes when the people who caused it need a favor." I hung up without agreeing. The next morning I said the whole thing out loud in therapy. Not for permission, just to hear it cleanly. Why would I go back? I answered before I had time to dress it up. Because Megan might actually need someone. That distinction mattered. Not my parents. Megan. I drove to Newton 2 days later. Not because I had softened. Not because the past was resolved. I went because I wanted to see that house without shaking. I went because if Megan was really collapsing, I wanted the truth directly. And I went because I wanted to know whether I could step back into that place without becoming small again. The house looked exactly the same. Stone path, trim hedges, polished windows. It still looked like a magazine cover. My mother opened the door quickly and hugged me. I did not hug her back. My father stood in the hall behind her. Older, thinner, still arranged. The first thing I noticed was not them. It was the walls. Photos of Megan everywhere. Awards, graduation pictures, vacations, frames carefully chosen to make her life look seamless. There was almost nothing of me. One family portrait by the stairs. A school photo in the study. That was enough. The house had always told the truth when they did not. In the kitchen, my mother started talking too fast. Doctors, bills, bad influences, missed appointments. My father stood there like a man giving a briefing. Neither of them asked how I had been. Neither of them thanked me for coming. Then my mother said, "We don't know how much you knew." I looked at her. She added, "If Megan reached out before and you ignored it, that would be useful to know." I asked, "Are you asking whether I abandoned her?" My father said, "We are trying to understand the timeline." Within minutes, blame was already being tested for fit. I asked where Megan was. Upstairs. Resting. Unstable. Not herself. I walked past both of them and went to find her. Her room was dark, curtains half closed, the air stale, a glass of water on the floor, a pile of clothes on a chair. For a second I could not connect this woman with the polished sister from my memory. She looked thin, exhausted, afraid. When she saw me, her face changed. Not relief, exactly. More like disbelief with no energy left behind it. She said my name once. "Claire." I closed the door. She looked down and said, "They really got you to come." I said, "They called." She let out a tired breath that might have been a laugh. "Of course they did." Then she said, "I'm sorry." No speech before it. No defense. Just the sentence. She apologized for graduation, for laughing, for letting our parents use me as the target while she stayed safe. She said surviving in that house had meant staying aligned with them, staying easy, staying impressive. She said she hated that version of herself. I believed her. Not because the words were perfect, because she looked like someone who no longer had the strength to perform. She told me being the perfect daughter had never felt like a reward. It had felt like maintenance. Grades, tone, posture, choices. Everything watched. Everything folded back into the family image. She said, "I wasn't free. I was displayed." Part of me resisted her pain. Part of me thought, "You still laughed while I was being cut open." Both things were true. I sat there holding both. Then she told me something worse. She said she had tried to contact me months earlier, more than once. Emails, messages, no answer. I told her I had received nothing. She frowned and pointed to her laptop. I opened the sent folder. There were the messages. My name. The right provider. One wrong letter in the address line. Every message sent neatly into nowhere. I asked who had given her my email. She said, "Mom." Everything shifted in that second. My mother had not just hurt me years ago. She had also controlled the silence between Megan and me. When Megan reached for help, the line had been bent so it would miss me. That was not care. That was management. That was control, dressed up as family protection. Megan looked at me and said, "I thought you hated me." I said, "I thought you never tried." That is the damage of controlled silence. It lets two people grieve each other while a third person keeps her hands clean. Downstairs, I could hear dishes. My mother making order. My father waiting. For the first time in years, I did not feel weaker than anyone in that house. I felt clear. I felt angry. And I knew I was done pretending I had left over a joke. If you have ever learned the truth so late it changed the past, stay with me. What happened next was the first honest confrontation our family ever had. I took Megan's laptop downstairs and put it on the kitchen table. My parents looked at the screen, then at me. No one spoke at first. I asked my mother, "Why is my email wrong in Megan's messages?" She glanced at the screen and said, she was confused. I said, "The same wrong address every time?" My father stepped in. "This is not the moment for accusations." I answered, "No, this is exactly the moment." My mother set down the dish towel. She said, "You have no idea what we've been dealing with." Years earlier, that line might have worked. "Not then," I said. "I know exactly what you've been dealing with. Losing control." Her face changed. Not guilt, offense. That told me I was finally near the truth. My father straightened and said, "Watch your tone," I said. "You called me useless in Boston." He answered at once. "We were joking." There it was, the old shield. I said, "No, you were establishing rank." My mother said my name sharply. I kept going. "You did it in public because humiliation works better when witnesses help." My father's jaw tightened. My mother said, "This family is in crisis, and you want to revisit old wounds." I said, "They are not old if you are still using the same methods." Megan was standing in the doorway. I had not heard her come down. She looked unsteady, but she was listening. My mother changed her tone immediately. Soft, concerned, gentle. "Sweetheart, you should be upstairs." Megan did not move. She asked, "Did you change Claire's email?" My mother said, "I was trying to keep stress off you." Megan asked, "By making sure she never answered me?" My father said, "You were not well. Decisions had to be made." Megan gave a small, broken laugh. "By you. Always by you." That was the first time in my life that Megan and I stood on the same side inside that house. My father tried to interrupt each sentence once it stopped sounding like his version. My mother kept reaching for softer words, as if softer words could change facts. Crisis, stress, misunderstanding. None of those words matched what had happened. None of them matched Boston. None of them matched the altered email. None of them matched the years. I was done letting polished language clean up what had been deliberate for years. The perfect daughter and the useless one. Both reduced in different ways. Both arranged around my parents' need to manage the family story. I thought of every dinner where she had been praised while I was corrected. Every holiday photo where she stood in the center and I stood at the edge. Every time my parents had used her success to discipline me and used my failure, real or invented, to keep her in line too. The methods were different. The purpose was the same. My mother cried then. Small tears, controlled tears. She said, "After everything we sacrificed for you girls." I said nothing. I had seen those tears before. They came when she was losing the room. My father tried another angle. "We are talking about getting Megan help." I answered, "Yes, which is why you will stop controlling access to her." He said, "You do not come into this house after 7 years and take over." I said, "Then stop asking me to save her." That landed. For once, he had to choose between pride and need. Megan sat down hard at the table and said, "I can't stay here like this." My mother said, "Of course you can." Megan shook her head. "No, I can't get better here." I do not think my parents expected that sentence from her. Not aloud. Not in front of me. So I said what would happen. Megan would go into treatment. A real program. Not hidden pills. Not locked drawers. Not whispered family management. Professional treatment. My parents could pay. They would not supervise. They would not intercept contact. They would not decide what information moved between Megan and me. If Megan wanted to speak to me, she would do it directly. If she wanted distance from them, that would be respected. My father said, "You are speaking as if we are the enemy." No one answered him. That silence answered enough. My mother said, "We only wanted what was best." Megan looked at her and said, "No. You wanted what looked best." That was the cleanest sentence spoken in that kitchen in years. We spent the next hour in plain language. No family mythology. Just facts. Megan needed treatment. She needed distance, structure, and honest contact. My parents wanted privacy and control. Those things were not the same. At one point, my father tried to shrink Boston again. He said, "We have all said things we regret." I asked, "Do you regret it?" He did not answer directly. He said, "You are still here talking about it." That told me everything. My mother whispered, "It was a joke," I said. "A joke that taught me never to bring either of you my pain." No one disputed that. Not even them. By evening, the arrangement was set. Not because my parents changed, because they had run out of leverage and excuses. Megan said she would go. I said I would help handle what came next. My father would pay. My mother would stop mediating every conversation. There was no warmth in the room. No speech about healing. Just terms. That was enough for that night. Before I left for a hotel, my mother followed me to the front hall. She asked, "Are you punishing us?" I put on my coat and said, "No, I'm ending your access." She stared at me as if I had spoken another language. Maybe I had. People who live on control rarely understand boundaries the first time. If you have ever had to become calm before anyone took you seriously, you know the cost of that night. Megan entered treatment soon after. There was nothing dramatic about it. Forms, rules, intake questions, withdrawal, meals, silence. Another day, then another. Recovery was not a family performance. It was work. Ugly, repetitive work. My parents paid, as agreed. They hated the limits. My mother kept asking whether she should speak to someone in charge. My father kept asking how private all of this would remain. There it was again. Private. Always the frame. Never the wound. I answered them with dates, procedures, and boundaries. Nothing more. I had finally learned that some people hear clarity only when it sounds impersonal. If you have ever had to help someone without reopening the door to everyone who hurt you, you know how careful that season was. Megan and I rebuilt slowly. Not with one apology. Not with a movie version of sisterhood. She apologized more than once for Boston. Not theatrically, just directly. She said she replayed my face in that room for years. She said she understood why I left. She said she should have protected me. I told her, "You didn't, but you were trapped in it too." That was as far as I could go then. It was enough to keep talking. She started saying more things plainly. About the accident. About the pills. About fear. About how being the perfect daughter made collapse feel impossible to confess. When the first parts of her life started slipping, she hid them because our parents did not love weakness. They loved management. So she managed until she could not. I listened. Sometimes that was all either of us could do. I kept my own life. That mattered. I went back to my work in medical research. I kept my apartment. I kept therapy. I did not move back to Newton. I did not answer family calls at all hours. I did not become the good daughter who repairs everything because she finally has leverage. My parents tried to slide back into old habits. My mother would say, "You should encourage Megan to come home for a while." I would answer, "That is her decision." My father would ask, "What exactly is she saying in those sessions?" I would say, "That is not your information." At first they pushed. Then they learned my answers would not change. A few months later, my mother asked if we could all have dinner in Newton. Just a quiet family evening. As if tone could erase history. I said no. She asked why I was making healing so difficult. I said, "Because pretending is what made it difficult." She went quiet, not persuaded, just blocked. There were still moments when I questioned myself. Was I too cold now? Had I become rigid in the name of self-protection? Were my parents simply people of their generation, the kind who believed image, discipline, and pressure were love in formal clothes? Maybe some people would say yes. Maybe some would say they were afraid and acted badly from fear. I understand that argument. I have visited it myself. Then I remember the microphone, the flowers, the altered email, the way every injury became my overreaction. Concern does not erase you to keep itself comfortable. Control does. The first time Megan visited my apartment after treatment, she looked around slowly. It was small, quiet, nothing impressive. She said, "You built this by yourself." I said, "Yes." Then she said, "I used to think you were the one who got away with things." I looked at her. She gave a tired smile. "I know better now." That sentence did not repair the years, but it settled somewhere deep. We built something that had never really existed between us. Not forced closeness, not holiday peace. Something slower. Coffee without our parents. Calls that were sometimes awkward. Truth without performance. We were both shaped by the same house. Just in different directions. My parents never gave the apology they should have. Not really. There were versions. We made mistakes. Perhaps we pushed too hard. But neither of them named Boston. Neither said useless. Neither admitted they loved control and family image more than honesty. I stopped waiting for that. Some endings begin the moment you stop bargaining for language other people refuse to learn. The boundary became simple. Limited contact. No access to my private life beyond what I chose. No holidays in that house. No guilt treated as proof of love. If they wanted a relationship with Megan, that would be on terms she set, not through me. I was no longer the family's extra daughter. I was not their correction. I was not the storage place for damage they preferred not to name. The daughter they called useless was the one who came back clear-headed, the one who did not panic, the one who could look at the mess without pretending it was prettier than it was. I did not save Megan alone. She did the work. Professionals did the work. Time did the work. But I was the one who refused the family script long enough to see the truth and hold it. I did not return to being the obedient daughter. I did not forgive for appearance. I did not step back into the frame. When relatives asked whether things were better, I learned to say, "They are different." That was the cleanest, honest answer. The last time I stood outside my parents' house in Newton, I did not go in. I had dropped off something Megan wanted after a visit there. It was late afternoon. The windows caught the same light. The hedges were trimmed. The front steps were spotless. For a moment, it looked exactly like the house I grew up in. Then I understood what had changed. Not the house. Me. I no longer needed it to admit what it was. I no longer needed my parents to confirm what they had done. The facts were enough. Boston happened. The laughter happened. The silence happened. The altered email happened. The call for help happened. So did my answer. I got back into my car and sat there with both hands on the wheel. No speech. No tears. Just a quiet sense that the line held. Megan was in recovery. Our relationship was being rebuilt on truth instead of ranking. My parents were no longer in charge of the story. That was the closest thing to justice I was going to get. So I took the road away from the house again. Not running, just leaving on purpose. And this time, I kept all of me.